Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on building energy markets in displacement settings. My name is Elif Demir from the GPA Coordination Unit, and I will be opening the webinar today. Please feel free to share your name, organization, and location on the chat as well. Thank you so much for making the time to join the session today. Our webinar aims to present the key findings from the READS program implemented by the GPA Coordination Unit with partnership from SNV, Mercico, and Practical Action. So just sharing some guidelines for participation today. First, please make sure to unmute yourself when it's your turn to speak, and please mute yourself when you're not. Also, we'd like to keep this session very interactive, so please use the chat function for your questions and comments. In addition, we also encourage you to share your experiences and insights openly. And finally, the recording and the presentation from today's webinar will be available at the GPA website. So going into the agenda for today, we'll start the session with a presentation from the READS program, detailing out some of the barriers and enablers for energy access, and highlighting some promising solutions that can be implemented in the 3 READS countries that will be the main focus of today's session. And then we'll hear from our partners, SNV in Kenya, Practical Action in Rwanda, and Mercico in Uganda. We'll then open the floor for your questions and comments, and then we'll have a fun little exercise called Statements on Energy Access and Displacement Settings, where we'll have polls to have an interactive discussion. So now I would like to give the floor to Megan Teuber from the GPA Coordination Unit to kick us off the webinar. Megan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Elif, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. It's a pleasure to see so many familiar names and faces in today's discussion. I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity of sharing both some of the key findings from our READS research, as well as some of our key partners' work that they've been doing in the humanitarian energy space. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Megan Teuber, and I'm the program manager of the Roadmaps for Energy Access and Displacement Settings program hosted by the GPA. And together with my colleague Phil, we'll start our session off today with a brief introduction of the READS research. Next slide, please. I'm not, oh, there we go. Sorry, I wasn't sure if my screen had frozen. Great. So for anyone who might not be familiar with the Global Platform for Action on Sustainable Energy and Displacement Settings, the GPA is a coordination platform that essentially brings together any actors who are working specifically on the topic of achieving sustainable SDG 7, the goal of affordable and clean energy access, specifically in displacement settings. And we essentially bring together both practitioners, but also try and convene donors who are interested in this topic by really working on promoting knowledge exchange, building the evidence base around this topic, looking at developing things like innovative financing mechanisms to promote energy access in displacement settings, and crucially also coordinating the existing work and really being able to create linkages amongst other actors in this space. Next slide, please. To give you a bit of an overview of the humanitarian energy landscape, you can see there's quite a range of different actors already involved in this space. So we have a range of humanitarian agencies. Crucially, many of the UN agencies have specific work that within their general mandate also looks at energy access. There are many other international bodies that include UNITAR, which the GPA is hosted by, as well as many implementing partners, typically a range of NGOs, as well as development agencies that implement specific humanitarian energy projects on the ground. There is also a wide range of research and advocacy organizations. You can see some of the names there as well that have supported producing knowledge on this topic of humanitarian energy, along with a range of donors who are specifically interested and have promoted and funded projects in this space. And then, of course, collaboration with government authorities in the host countries where the projects are implemented is always of key essence and provide very crucial support to the work. That's a very brief overview of the landscape. And next slide, please. To talk a little bit about the READS program. So the READS program is a research program whose key output really is to develop 10 country-specific roadmap reports that essentially summarize what the energy situation is in a given country context, and looking specifically what kind of energy work is happening in displacement settings in the given context, featuring local stakeholders who are already making their experiences with energy interventions and highlighting best practices, as well as identifying ways to really build on the work that's already happening through viable project opportunities to increase sustainable energy in displacement settings. We are implemented by the GPA, who's hosted by UNITAR, and we have the pleasure of working with local partners in each of the countries that we have a report in. So far, you can see there's Practical Action, Mercy Corps, and SNV, who will also be presenting today, and we've also partnered with NRC, ANERA, and Near East Foundation. We're generously funded by the IKEA Foundation, and on the bottom right of my slide, you can see the 3 reports that we have so far published, all focusing on the East African context, which will be the focus of today's session, sharing findings from these 3 reports. But we also have further reports coming up in next phases. Next slide, please. So a brief overview of the READS process. I just want to highlight that we are not a massive research program that is doing our own primary data collection, but instead what our goal is to really consolidate the existing information that's in this space by working with the partners who are already doing interventions on this topic and really being able to benefit from the data that is already available, for example, through assessments or monitoring data or other research studies. So what we do as READS is that we partner with these organizations to bring together all of the existing information into one space, into our reports, and then we analyze that information to try and see what the key barriers are to improving access to sustainable energy in displacement settings, and crucially also look at what are our partners already doing and what approaches are working, what kind of energy delivery models have the potential to address these gaps successfully. And crucially also looking at what are new opportunities for partnerships and collaborations within the space. And as mentioned before, one of the key components of our reports is a list of projects that we believe would be viable and would merit receiving funding. Next slide, please. So to kick off our presentation on the findings, as I mentioned before, today's webinar will focus on the 3 first countries that we featured in our reports. So those 3 countries are all in East Africa: Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. I'll keep this very short because you can also, I'm sure, first of all, that most of you are already experts on these contexts, and also we also, of course, hope that you will check out our reports and read things in more detail. But just to give you a bit of an idea of the context that we work in. So in Kenya, Kenya hosts around 600,000 displaced people, mostly in 2 camps. Although there's movement towards a more integrated settlement approach and increasing economic inclusion, as of now, the majority of refugees live either in Kakuma or in Dadaab or in Nairobi. And in practice, there are various restrictions still on employment and freedom of movement. What we've seen in the context of Kakuma, that there's a lot of private sector initiatives already happening, a lot of refugee-led businesses as well. But the situation is vastly different in Dadaab, where there is less work done specifically on the topic of energy and also less private sector engagement. In Rwanda, there are around 133,000 displaced people living in 5 camps, as well as in Kigali. Refugees typically have quite similar rights to citizens, but again, there's various restrictions, including on movement. But we see that the context is increasingly just very encouraging for private sector engagement, including very high access, for example, to financial services, and that there's increasing, again, private sector engagement with also many local cooking companies, for example, who are working in the displacement context already. In Uganda, there's a huge amount of displaced people of around 1.5 million, typically living in integrated settlements along with the coast communities mostly in the West Nile and the Southwest regions. And in general, Uganda has really been heralded as having one of the most progressive and welcoming policy frameworks towards refugees. But of course, there still also remain various barriers, particularly when it comes to things like energy access and access to financial services. One of the flagship kind of interesting things about Uganda is that they have a specific policy that has been dedicated to the topic of energy in displacement settings. And that policy has been ratified, but the implementation is so far stalled due to various resource issues. At this point, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Phil, who will take us through some of the other more energy-specific findings of our reports.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Megan. Great, thank you. It's my job to try and summarize the energy situation in these three countries, which is kind of an impossible job in the next 5 minutes, but I'll try and draw out some trends to kind of set the scene for the rest of this webinar. Firstly, if we look to clean cooking, across the board, we see this as the most pressing need across all three contexts. There's, of course, the health impacts of using traditional biomass for cooking, but increasingly we also see the environmental impact as one of the most pressing needs to move to cleaner sources. We do see as well there's a high potential for electric cooking in all three countries. To draw out a few great examples we're seeing across Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. In Kenya, we see great work by Usafi Green and Sunken working on improved charcoal stoves, and also the e-cooking pilot for households and social institutions under the Pepsi-K project with SMV. In Rwanda, there's great work being done by Practical Action under the RE4R project, which sold over 7,000 improved cook stoves. On the other hand, we see more traditional distribution models for LPG in 2 of the camps that's been supported by UNHCR. Meanwhile, in Uganda, there's been great work with RBFs, results-based finance for improved cook stoves by GIZ. And there's also an e-cooking pilot being run by Pasito and Mercy Corps up in the West Nile region. If we move to the next slide, please. When it comes to electricity access for households, in general, the situation is relatively the same in that most households have pretty limited electricity access, but we do see a growth in off-grid solar products, and increasingly these are being sold by private companies, again, under RBF systems. Some of the camps and settlements are connected to the grid, some are not. It varies a lot between the countries and the individual contexts. But typically where a camp is connected to the grid or a settlement is connected to the grid, this doesn't usually extend to households. One of the great examples we've seen, and you can see in the picture here, is the Renuvia mini grid. This has been scaling up over the past few years, and is really a flagship venture. Interestingly as well, there's now interactions between Renuvia, which is a US-based company, and local enterprises, Yeleli and Okapi Green, based in Kakuma and Kalabei. There's also been work under the Mbeya project for off-grid solar products by other smaller companies. In Rwanda, meanwhile, we've seen our RBFs under the RE4R, Renewable Energy for Refugees program, through 2 companies, Bbox, which is an international company, and Belacom, based in Rwanda. And there's also a company called Off-Grid Box, which is selling really interesting, smaller, more modular solar systems and lighting kits for households. Meanwhile, in Uganda, again, there's been RBFs through GIZ and also Mercy Corps, and interesting models around energy kiosks that are managed by community members and really embedding those energy technologies within the communities themselves. Next slide, please. And now if we move to a somewhat larger scale energy access for businesses and community facilities, again, across the board, we see that productive uses of energy, so PUE, is relatively low. But we see this as starting from a low baseline, but with high opportunities. We see a lot of opportunities for skills and appliance trainings, and also access to finance. PUE appliances, for example, are expensive. So having access to finance for businesses can really lower that barrier of entry and make these technologies affordable over the long term. Similarly, when it comes to solarizing community facilities, there is a high upfront cost of doing this, but the benefits almost always outweigh those costs. If you can overcome the initial barriers, you can save a lot of money and a lot of greenhouse gas emissions compared to the diesel systems that are normally being used for health centers, for example, if they have access to electricity at all. Again, to draw out some examples from our 3 countries, in Kenya, we found that businesses use around 2/3 of the energy from the Renuvia mini grid that I showed. And again, the PepsiK project has been piloting electric cooking in schools, so looking at more communal scale access to energy. In Rwanda, work under the RE4R project has set up business centers. This has been a great help, allowing businesses to access grid connections in this case, which otherwise would have been administratively impossible. There's also work by Rwandan company Mesh Power to set up mini grids for health centers. And the street lighting cooperatives under the RE4R project have had a lot of success in maintaining streetlights. Meanwhile, in Uganda, there's been great work by GIZ again on solarizing health centers in the West Nile region with a real focus on the long-term O&M. The next slide, please. Again, it's impossible to go into the details for all these different contexts, but we see three main trends when it comes to barriers and opportunities for energy access. Firstly is about the availability. So we see there is a lack of high quality products, emphasis on the high quality part of that. Free distribution is normally focused on substandard products, and it means the private sector has difficulties engaging in these kind of markets. What we see as an opportunity is looking at results-based financing and scaling up the programs that already exist for local companies. That also means establishing shops and outlets in these displacement settings, in the camps and settlements, and normally support for those companies when establishing those that kind of infrastructure in these contexts. When it comes to the affordability, of course, there is a low ability to pay by displaced people and often in the host communities too. That's compounded by the fact that there's high upfront costs and typically a lack of access to finance to make those costs more affordable in the long term. On the opportunity side, we see a real potential for demand side subsidies. Of course, if you can reduce the costs of these technologies, the uptake will be higher, but we also see there needs to be a flexible repayment mechanism in place so that if people have variable incomes, for example, that makes them a lot more accessible. We also need to work with communities to identify how to make these inclusive for vulnerable households, for example. And then finally, when it comes to acceptability, this applies in particular to clean cooking. There's lots of cultural preferences around the preparation of food, and there's also a lack of familiarity with some of these improved options. There's also a lack of awareness of the cost effectiveness of some of these technologies and the real financial benefits that transitioning from traditional sources to improved sources, how much money you can save by doing so. We see there's great potential for product demonstrations to get these products out into the market, working with companies to showcase their products and showcase the benefits, both in terms of health, in terms of the environmental bit of benefits and the cost. We think this really should be supported by training and employing local technicians based in those settings, both to create jobs and livelihoods, but also to make sure people have rapid access to repair, for example, of these technologies when they need them. Finally, this should also be supported through product warranties, making sure these high quality products last a long time, and then inevitably, when they do fail, have a proper e-waste management system in place. Next slide, please. So now just to highlight a few things from the Reed's reports. One is that, as Megan said, we're not an implementing organization, but there's a huge number of stakeholders working in every context that's doing great work that we've put a lot of effort into highlighting in our reports. You can see this is just the example from Uganda, how many different stakeholders are working on energy in displacement settings. And I'd really encourage you to open up these reports in each of these countries and see who's working on what. We've split it up into different types of stakeholders, governments, humanitarian development organizations, private companies, and other categories. So you can flick through and you can see which organizations are working, what they're doing, and potentially who you'd like to partner with in the future. Next slide, please. And finally, we have worked quite hard on the Reed's projects to identify impactful projects that we think would have a great impact on increasing sustainable energy in displacement settings. In each report, there's around 6 or 7 different project concepts across all different types of energy access for households, clean cooking, businesses, social institutions, that we try and highlight some of the opportunities and do some of these first steps in project design that we hope that you'll read and pick up and see how you can contribute to this. Again, we're not an implementing organization, we're not donors, but hopefully you can take these project concepts, develop them yourself, identify some partners within our stakeholder directory, and move these projects forwards to increase access to sustainable energy in these 3 countries, and in the future, the rest of the Reed's countries too. So with that, I'll now pass back to Megan to introduce the rest of the section.
Thank you so much, Phil, for so concisely summarizing what are, in practice, very long reports, as anyone who will have seen them will know. But yeah, I would just like to echo the appeal to please check them out if you haven't done so. There's a lot more detail to go into. And again, we just had to summarize them on a very high level, but it would be really great if you could, explore them further, and feel free to get back to us with any questions or comments. I just also wanted to highlight that we really only were picking out very specific examples of projects, but there's so much more happening, again, which is detailed in our reports. And a big thank you to everyone on this call. I see there's a lot of READS workshop participants, because we had an in-person workshop in each of the contexts in the countries that we've mentioned. And really, the reports were not possible. We would not have been able to develop these reports without your amazing contributions. So thank you so much for the work in there. If you are a READS participant in the workshops, we will have captured your work in our reports. But I also see some names that I don't know, and it would be really great to hear from you too. If you've done any relevant work in the humanitarian energy space, or anything that you think would be related or relevant, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to either use the chat to maybe post a short description of your work, or get in touch with us separately. Again, we're trying to create a good comprehensive overview of what's happening in this space, but it's impossible to capture everything since there's so much happening. So it'd be great to hear from you. And now I would like to hand over to our three project partners who supported the development of each of our East Africa reports. So we've got SNV in Kenya, Practical Action in Rwanda, and Mercy Corps in Uganda, giving them a huge thanks again for your amazing support to our research. And also today's presentations are also an opportunity to give an update, because our reports were all published in 2023. But since then, there's been a lot that's been happening for each of our partners. They've been working on new interventions, or even in some cases scaling up the work that they've been doing previously and are featured in the reports. So yeah, this is a good opportunity to hear about the more recent developments for their work. So I'm looking forward to this presentation. And I think we'll start with Christine from SNV. So over to you.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Navalayo, working with SNV, based in Kakuma, where we are implementing a market-based energy access project being funded by NDEV. I'll be with my colleague Laura. In case of anything, she'll jump in to support. Next slide. Yeah, so as I said initially, most of our projects that we implement in Kakuma are funded by Energizing Development, that's NDEV. And we've been in Kakuma since 2017, implementing the various energy projects. I'll just give a brief as we go through the presentation. Next slide. So the biggest project we've been implementing since 2017 is called the NDEV Humanitarian Component Project. In short, we call it Market-Based Energy Access Project. And currently we are in the phase 4 of the project, whose objective is to develop the local networks for energy products for households, micro businesses, and social institutions by providing technical assistance and grant funding for private partners, and also conducting awareness campaigns for the end users to promote clean energy, both for cooking and lighting in both Kakuma and Kalobeye settlement and the hosting community here in Turkana. Next. The next project is called the PUE, Productive Use of Energy Project. This one we were funded by GIZ under the ESDS program, focused on the promotion of using of energy for productive use. And this one was born out of the mini grids that were put up in Kalobeye through the support of GIZ, working together with Renuvia. So the project mostly was to sensitize the community, or to create awareness among the community for the opportunities available to them as households or businesses, given that now they are able to access electricity from the mini grid, and also to look at working with Renuvia also to create end user education on safe use of electricity. So we did the first phase in 2022. Currently, we are doing the second phase, which will be completing late this year. And in this second phase, we have also had an inclusion on e-waste management because we realized that we have a lot of these solar products or electrical and electronic appliances being sold here in the Kakuma market, but in terms of managing them, there is an issue. So we are also working with an organization called We Center, which is in charge of collecting electronic wastes to create awareness to the end users and the community at large on how to manage e-wastes. And there's also a component on access to finance. Next. Then we also had a project called Promoting Electric Pressure Cookers in Kalobeyei, PepsiK. This one, we implemented it in the year 2021-2022, just taking advantage of the Renuvia mini grid in Kalobeyei. We wanted to find out if we have any potential for the use of electric pressure cookers in the households and the businesses in Kalobeyei settlement. And we piloted with, I think, 15 households and 20 businesses, mostly hotels. And then within the project period also, we were able to launch, to work with one of our private partners to launch electric pressure cookers in the Kakuma Kalobeyei market, where we were able to sell almost a total of 100 electric pressure cookers based on various payment models, including cash and installment payments. Next. We also piloted the use of large electric pressure cookers in social institutions here in Kakuma and Kalobeyei. This one we worked with the MEX. This was to find out the feasibility of using electricity to cook in social institutions. We piloted with 3 schools and 1 hospital. And this was based on the installation of UNHCR installing mini grids in the social institutions, that's the schools and the hospitals in the Kakuma and Kalobeyei refugee camp. So here we had 2 types of EPCs, a 20-liter EPC and a 40-liter EPC. And we trained the kitchen staff on how to use and install the EPCs. So the final results for these ones, we are still waiting for MEX, but initial results showed that it is possible if the population is not too large, that is maybe less than 1,000. But if it's more than 1,000, like most of the schools here in Kakuma and Kalobeyei, then it means we need bigger systems to do that. Next. And then I'd like to talk to on access to finance as a standalone, because since we started implementing the projects in 2017, we work with the private sector companies that we work with to provide the technologies or the innovations here in Kakuma. And when we talk of market-based approach, it means that we are not, in most of the cases, we find that the prices are not either subsidized. So since we started having this, there has been an issue from the end users on the appliances or the products being well received. But now the issue, especially when we come to the higher tier cooking appliances, And also for the productive use of energy appliances, that's been the issue of access or affordability, not access, affordability of the appliances. And so over the years, we've been working with the partners and also Endeavour as the donor to see how we can manage to support, especially the end users, to acquire some of these appliances. And currently, we have my colleague who is in charge of access to finance, who is looking at modalities of how to support the end users or even the vendors or SMEs dealing in the appliances, especially the productive use of appliances, to be able to enable that the end users are able to access the appliances affordably, and also the vendors are able to sell to the end users and they are able to pay without taking too long. From PepsiK the pilot for electric pressure cookers, it was evident that for those ones that bought on installment payment, a big number of them were not able to repay in the duration that was set for them. So access to finance is still a big issue when it comes to accessing energy, especially for productive use. Next. So in summary of the projects we've done, what we've done and what we worked well for us and the challenges. So what SNV does, as I've indicated, mostly we work with private companies to provide the technologies, whether it is in cooking or lighting. And also, like in cooking, we worked with one of the private partner companies to establish a stove production unit here in Kakuma, the improved cook stoves here in Kakuma. And he's grown really well and doing very well at the moment. Right now, we are just supporting with the marketing activities. We also provide information to the private companies and also the other sector, energy sector players here in Kakuma and the county. In terms of the technologies, the view from the community. We also do a lot of end user awareness campaigns when it comes to both energy for cooking and lighting to influence behavior, especially for cooking. We did, like for cooking, we did a whole year behavior change campaign just to encourage the different communities, especially in the refugee camp, that they can use the improved cook stoves and also all the electric pressure cookers to make their meals without having any major changes in how they cook. And also, we also support in enabling environment. This is, as I said, working with other stakeholders in HCR, the DRS, and the county government department in charge of energy to discuss issues affecting energy access, affordability in Kakuma, and supporting in also the bills and all that in the county. So what worked well for us is that when SNV started in Kakuma, at that time, actually, I think UNHCR was pulling out or reducing in terms of the support they were giving in terms of the funds for energy. So it created a big opportunity for the products that we are supporting the partners to bring in the market. So there was a big market. Actually, at that time, there was a study that had been done to show that Kakuma is a big marketplace, including for energy products. So there was ready market, and even up to now, the market is still growing. Also, the energy appliances in terms of affordability or variety is also increasing, and the players in the market are increasing by the day. So we have availability or accessibility issues are also reducing. And also there is an opportunity for us to give out information to the communities. We found out that the communities at that time, some of them were still using either firewood or charcoal, or even they didn't have a source for lighting because they didn't know that we have options out here. So we had an opportunity to raise awareness or to give out information to the communities comfortably. So some of the challenges that we faced along the way, one, as I indicated, was that capital. Some of these technologies, especially for the higher tier cooking and the PUE, are quite expensive. So as much as we promote them, we find that in terms of affordability for the end user, sometimes it's a challenge. Also, quality of products. Here you find that currently we operate in a free market. So we also have products from business or private companies that we don't work with. So for the partners that we don't work with, it's not easy for us to follow up in terms of quality. So we've had issues of sometimes having no fake products being sold to the community. And then in terms of accessibility or affordability for refugees, initially it used to be a challenge because they couldn't get credit facilities because they didn't have the right documentation that is recognized by the financial institution. But this is changing with time, given the Shirika plan that is coming into place, and hopefully in the near future they'll be able. Actually, at the moment, some of them are able to access the facilities, and in the near future, we hope that more will be able to access the facilities from the financial institutions. And then also for the private companies that we work with, some of them, it's very expensive to set up businesses here in Kakuma. So majority of them are usually working through distributorship, but it's still working well. Next. I think that is it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for that great presentation. Lots of interesting information there. Just for our audience, we'll be sharing the slides afterwards. And if in case you have any further questions, please get in touch with Christine and Laura. I see there are some questions already coming into the chat. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to our next presentation. But if Christine, if you don't mind answering the questions in the chat, and then we'll gather some more. We'll have a few minutes for Q&A later before we move on to the more interactive part of today's session, where we'd also like to hear from our audience members and have some more detailed questions for our panelists. But for now, I'll hand over to Krista from Practical Action.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
We can, thank you, Krista, go ahead.
Great. So as they just mentioned, my name is Krista Kajiruka, and I work in Practical Action as a project manager for the renewable energy for refugees, currently implementing phase 2. And I'm currently based in Rwanda, in Kigali. So I will quickly go through my presentation about establishing market-based approaches in the humanitarian settings. So, and as a background, next slide. So as a background, Practical Action, we are a global international organization that is putting different ideas to work with different communities, especially marginalized communities, and so people can have a better life and can change the world. And also we have our head office that is based in the UK, but we have regional offices in Africa, Asia, and also in Latin America. But I will mostly talk about projects that we have in Rwanda currently that is being implemented, and also that is using the market-based approach. Next slide. So globally, we have helped around 306,000 people to access cheaper and clean energy. But in Rwanda, we are also working with different private companies to provide clean energy solutions in refugee camps. We are working in 5 refugee camps in Rwanda, and we are providing different solutions in terms of solar home systems, clean cooking, solar streetlight, and also productive use of energy. Next slide. So for the Renewable Energy for Refugees project, it's a project that has a main objective to deliver market-based investment or renewable energy investment in humanitarian settings. So we are working directly with the refugees and also their host communities. So the project is funded by Swedish Embassy, SIDA, and it has started since 2022, and it will last for 4 years, and it has a budget of around 6.4 million. So it has 4 key interventions. As I just mentioned, we are currently providing solar home systems in refugee camps to household and small enterprises. We are also working with the private companies to provide clean cooking solutions, where the companies are selling cooking stoves as well as the fuel. And we are also working with the private company to provide solar street light in the camp as well as the surrounding host community. And we are also we are supporting businesses to upgrade their operations in terms of productive use of energy. Next slide. So why are we focusing on market-based approach? So we think that a market-based approach provides sustainable business models where the refugees would not really rely only on the financial aid or external aid, and have resilience where they can also, market-based approach can promote resilience for refugees so that they don't really rely on external aid or waiting for product to be distributed, but also have a say on their purchases, where we work with private companies that provide those kind of solutions in the camps, and they do sell solar home system, cooking stoves, and we have many so that we don't have kind of monopoly, and it also encourages competition as they provide different products at a different price, which is more affordable and more accessible. So even the refugees have their own say in terms of choosing the product. They have the right, or they have to do their own decision depending on their needs, instead of just distributing the product. But at least when they go and look for the product, choose for the product, they also have that sense of ownership. So apart from that, this approach also creates opportunities for job, as those companies recruits refugees to do as sales agents. They also provide some trainings to them for just basic technical assistance. And also they also provide different trainings about marketing strategies, which they can even use even after the project has ended. Next slide. So how we engage private sector engagement as practical action. We provide the request for proposal of what we need, and the companies, when they apply,
Krista, can you hear us? I believe you might be having internet.
Hello.
Hello, yes, we can hear you again. Great, go ahead.
So can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, all good.
Okay, I don't know where you lost me, or Should I continue?
Yes, please just continue. Thank you.
So, okay, I was talking about private sector engagement, how we do engage them, and how the private sector companies also engage the communities to understand their needs as they prepare the documents about the business that they're proposing that will really suit the refugees' needs. So once they apply, we also do our review and review the applications, and as a tender committee, we go to the negotiation stage and also sign the contract. We also do a kickoff meeting as before they do start implementation in the refugees with the refugees. Next slide. So on this slide, it's
Hi, Krista, can you hear us? I believe you might have frozen again. Afraid we've lost Krista for now. Let's give it another few moments to see if the connection comes back. And if not, we will make sure, of course, to share the slides. And if there's any, maybe Krista can have some time to share anything she might have missed. If not, let's see. Yeah, I believe
Hello.
Krista. Oh, hello. Krista, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Great. Yeah, please go ahead. You just started on this slide, and I think we're almost up for time.
Yes.
But
Sorry, it's network issues. So I was talking
no.
about how we do co-investment with the companies, as we don't do direct subsidies to the refugees. Rather, we do share investment with the companies where they provide their budget, what they think they're going to do in the camps, and we also do some co-investment, which a targeted investment with private sector suppliers, which we have seen that increase production capacity and also reduces the cost of the stoves, of the solar home system, because as we put our investment and they also bring their investment, it's for the aim to have a more affordable product to the refugees, which will be even there after the project has ended. So it also helps in terms of customer management in the after-sales services. And it also strengthens capacity for the refugees, as I mentioned before, because they get employment. And also the private sector, as we discuss with them, as we work with them, they commit to continue their operations even after the project has ended, and they continue to have selling points in the refugee camp even after the project lifespan. Next slide. So where we are now, we mostly talk about two interventions because they are the most that are involved with the market-based approach. So for solar home system, we are working with two private companies. They are currently selling in the camps, and they have sold so far 1,024 solar home systems in the refugee camps, but of course they are continuing with the selling, as well as some of them receives solar home system because they get it from outside of the country. So it kind of takes some time, but they are currently progressing. So in terms of clean cooking, we are also working with 3 companies that are doing selling in the camps. They are currently selling cooking stoves and pellets across all 5 refugee camps. And so far, they have sold around 2,168 cook stoves and around 246,000 kgs of pellets. So we recently have a 3rd company that joined with us, and which introduced a forced air draft stoves, where the 2 were before selling natural air draft stoves. Next slide. So about the lessons learned on market-based approach. So in terms of lessons learned, we have seen changing market environment in refugee camps. So the economic landscape within the refugee camps is dynamic and can shift. We observe that market conditions can change due to various factors such as policy changes, influx and outflux of refugees, and other external economic factors. So these changes requires flexible business models and also adaptive strategies. So we keep encouraging private companies to be flexible in terms of their business models and to be to do more regular market assessment and continuous discussions with the refugees and business operating in the camps so that they can adapt to these changes and adjust their business model accordingly. So another lesson learned is about the changes in cash assistance for refugees because it affects also their purchasing power. So the purchasing power is really close tied to their cash assistance they received. So we have learned that fluctuation also in this assistance affect impact in terms of accessing the energy product. However, we highlight that this is the need for financial inclusion where our companies, the companies that we work together provide selling the product on pay-go, where the refugees have the right or have the option to pay the system in installment in case to help bridge that gap in case of changes in cash assistance. So the last lesson is about partnership. So we have seen that partnership for stakeholder engagement and collaboration is the key aspect for the sustainability of this market-based approach. So our experience has reinforced the critical of multi-stakeholder partnerships in creating sustainable market-based solutions. We really focused on effective collaboration between other NGOs, private sector companies, and government agencies, as well as the refugee communities themselves for the essential and for the long-term success for the project. Next slide. So I would like to thank you, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krista, for the excellent presentation and your reflections on what works when building markets for energy products and services. We'll have the chance again soon to really kind of delve into a bit more depth, but I'd like to hand over to our next presenter, just to say thank you also to Christine for answering the questions that were posed to her in the chat. Audience members, please feel free to check that out if you want to follow the conversation there. And Krista, I also see some questions coming in for you for practical action, so please go ahead and answer them in the chat, and then we'll regroup shortly. But for now, over to you, Purity from Mercy Corps.
Thank you very much, Megan. I hope you can hear me. It's a bit, it's raining where I am, but I hope the internet will be calm all through. So my name is Purity Kendi. I work with Mercy Corps as the Energy Access Advisor, but I'm also a NOCAP energy expert. So please, if you can move to the next slide. Next, yes, thank you. So in terms of Mercy Corps presence in Uganda, we have been in Uganda since 2006, and our main goal is to create economically dynamic, healthy, and secure community. And we focus on three major thematic areas, that is food security, peace and governance, and in terms of economic development. And in terms of our commitment, we have a commitment in terms of climate smart activities where energy falls in, and also energy is a key factor in all the three thematic areas. So in terms of geographical areas, we are in West Nile, that is northern Uganda, we're in Karamoja, and also in Kampala. Next slide, please. Yes, and now I'll just give a brief overview of the projects or projects that we're implementing in Uganda in regards to energy access. If you can move to the next slide. Yes, so in terms of energy access and all other projects that Mercy Coal implement, we use the market-based approach, MSD, in all our programming and the design of the project. And in terms of energy, our approach is to address the underlying market barriers in terms of energy access, in both in the displacement setting and in all other vulnerable communities that we work in. So what we do, we look at addressing the supply side barriers. For example, we partner with private sector companies to support them to build viable business models that can be fit and can be able to enable access of energy in displacement settings. We also support the private sector to localize their supply chain, and also we support them to develop
Purity, can you hear us? I believe we might be having connection issues. I think you're back. Purity, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just explaining our MSD approach, where we work with the private sector to address both supply side barriers, but also demand side. And also we work with the government to address the issues that are related to policy. Policies that can enable private sector engagement. So please, you can move to the next slide, and I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you right now. Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Okay. So I'll just go through a few example projects that we have implemented in Uganda. One being Ampere, which was access to energy in displacement settings together with STAIR. And this project were meant to test and prove the market for energy product in the refugee setting. And our target location was Bidibidi, which is in the northern part of Uganda in Yumbe. And under this project, we worked with two private sector companies, Village Power and Delight, to introduce their products and services, but also we supported them to develop the PEGO model, or else to refine their PEGO models to be able to access the refugee settlement. And through this, we were able to sell over 2,000 solar home systems to the vulnerable community through the PEGO model. And also these two projects have they have remained as the pilot or foundation. They have given us foundation for all other energy projects that we have been able to design in this location. Also, the data from this project was used even by GIZ in designing their subsidies, and it's still part of what we are using to refine the kind of products that we were able to develop. Next slide, please. Yes, Journey to Scale. This is a project that was implemented in 2019 to 2021. Mercy Coal in collaboration with Pesito. Pesito is a manufacturer of Ekoka, a solar electric cooker, very innovative technology that they're using. I even saw Simon, the CEO of Ekoka, is in the webinar, so great job that they're doing. And what we did was to work with Pesito to strengthen their supply side and supply chain and also distribution networks. Currently, Pesito has a local assembly center in Yumbe, and they have trained local technicians and also sales agents who are able to continue providing the after-sales services for the ECOCA. In this project, we were also able to develop, to support Pesito to develop pay-as-you-cook modalities, which enabled the sale of over 1,200 units. Pesito is still using the same pay-as-you-cook payment plan, and we are currently working with Pesito to see how we can refine the payment, the PEGO model in terms of more tailored to the consumption patterns of the people, but also in line with the income levels of the refugees. Yeah. Yes, and Pump Up. This is This is one of our active projects running. I started last year and it's still ongoing. This Pump Up is powering the uptake of climate change mitigation pumps, which is meant to promote the uptake of solar irrigation pumps in northern Uganda. We are working in 2 districts, Yumbe and Gulu, and the same approach. We are working with a private sector, a private company, Tulima Solar, to develop their business model, but also to support them in demand activation to be able to increase the uptake of these solar irrigation pumps in the northern Uganda. Next slide. Yeah, and then we have a project that is in the pipeline and almost to be finalized, called Sustain, which is a foundational stage to implement the Ampere that I mentioned. And the main goal of this project is to build a sustainable market for energy products, where we'll be looking at demand activation, supply side intervention in terms of building localized supply chain, a good retail network for the ESCOs, but also it has a component of enabling policy, regulatory, and coordination within the humanitarian setting. So our targets are to reach over 11,000 households, but this is still in pipeline, and we look forward to implementing this and sharing more experiences from this project. Next slide. Yeah, so in terms of lessons learned, I'll just walk you through a few of the lessons that we have learned from the project that we have been implementing. One being the need for inclusive credit and financing options. So as we are in our experience working with different ESCOs, but also with the vulnerable communities, we understand that there should be financing mechanisms that support both supply and demand side. You find a lot of support is on the demand side, but then there's also a gap in terms of funding in regards to supply side. For example, when we are working with small companies or else startups, you find that most of these companies face challenges in terms of working capital. So there's need to have more inclusive financing options that also allow the energy companies to access affordable working capital to be able to finance their inventory. And as Mexico, currently we are working to secure ways of establishing like a specialized financing vehicle that can be able to provide affordable working capital and loans to not only consumers, but also to the energy companies. And then another key lesson has been in regards to the pay-go and the pay-as-you-cook models that we implement. We have realized that in regards to the communities that we work with, you find that there's seasonality in terms of the incomes that they have. Most of them, they are farmers, so meaning they don't have a steady income all through the year. So what we are doing is we are working with private sector companies. You find the pay-go models that they have to see whether they can be able to develop, whether we can together be able to develop seasonal pay-go models that allow the consumers to be able to pay during the season, like the harvest season, and also to look at strategies on how the companies will be able to run even during the periods that the consumers cannot be able to maintain the repayment. And then another lesson has been on coordination. There's lack of coordination both at national and district level, and also in the displacement setting, you find that there's a lack of coordination in terms of what humanitarian agencies are doing and also development partners and the private sector. So we are trying to support the coordination elements, having all the key players together, and also in terms of, for example, you find that there's confusion even for the potential consumers if humanitarian
Hi, Purity, can you hear us? I think you might be having, there we go. Yes, I think you're back. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, please go ahead.
I don't know where you lost me at.
Still at coordination?
All right. Yeah, so to summarize the point on coordination is that we feel there's a need for holistic coordination between all the key players to ensure that even the subsidies that are provided are well coordinated, and I've seen that already up.
Hi, Purity, I'm afraid we've lost you again. Can you hear us? Hello? Yeah, there we go. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Great. You're back. Yes, you were still talking about the coordination point. Just in the interest of time, do you mind just summarizing it really fast, and then we'll have a chance to expand further in the next part of the session, if that's okay.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Yeah, and in terms of, I hope you could hear me on coordination, but the main point is that there's need for holistic coordination among all the key partners. And then in terms of subsidy, we agree there's need to deploy subsidies to increase the access and affordability, but also we have recognized that a subsidy model alone cannot be successful. So there's need for technical assistance to the energy companies to be able to develop the go-to market strategies, to be able to develop a viable business model, to be able to localize the supply chain. So currently we are working with Uganda, the government of Uganda under the World Bank program, and also working with other players who are providing subsidy to ensure that the other market barriers are also addressed within the subsidy models. Sorry. And then last also is in terms of awareness and awareness creation, just like all other speakers who have presented before, awareness, you find that even in Uganda, there's low level of awareness, and there's need to promote, to design awareness campaigns, and also to conduct a lot of demonstration on the use of clean cooking, clean energy products and other energy related products. I think next slide, which should be the last one. Can you hear me, Megan, please?
Yes, no, the rest was perfect. Thank you so much, Purity, for the great presentation and those really important reflections. Thank you again to all of our presenters. I think there's a lot of content there and really interesting examples of approaches that work when it comes to building markets for energy products and services, but also a lot of different challenges that you've all faced in your work. And it'd be really great to have the time to delve into, again, how do you really kind of pilot new energy delivery models? What are the kind of main things that you have experienced that have potential to also be scaled up? What are the challenges that still remain? We had now planned to have a Q&A, but I see that we're running out of time and I don't want to miss the next part of the session, because that is really where we're going to have a chance to hear from our audience as well. So thank you again to Christina and Krista, who've been answering questions in the chat. If you still have other questions that haven't been answered, please do just use the chat to do so, and our panelists will get back to you. For now, I'd like to move on to what we call our statement exercise. And basically how this is going to work, we're going to show you two different kind of positions about a specific topic. Here it goes, for example, and we're going to ask you to position yourself along the spectrum. My colleague Elif will share a poll shortly. But first of all, the question is, again, where do you kind of position yourself in terms of how much you agree with the two statements you see on the slide? So we're going to start with talking about clean cooking interventions. And I saw in the chat there was a lot of interest on the topic of e-cooking in particular. So we have two kind of positions that we've identified. If you as an organization have to choose what kind of interventions you want to focus on, would you more agree with the statement that current biomass practices are not sustainable and the future of cooking is electric? There's a lot of potential for it, and therefore effort should be focused on e-cooking? Or do you agree more with the statement that biomass cooking is here to stay and therefore effort should be focused on increasing the efficiency of biomass cooking methods and also localizing production chains? And you can see these are quite different positions, and of course there's much more nuance as well to them. But for now, for the purpose of the exercise, we just like you to select one of the options of the polls. If you full-heartedly agree with one of the statements, please go ahead and select that. If you are a bit undecided but agree more with one or the other, please select either somewhat agree with the statement above or somewhat agree with the statement below. If you're smack in the middle, you can choose agree equally with both statements, and we're very curious to see what our audience thinks on this question. So please go ahead and vote. Yes, and thank you to Noel, who very importantly observed that the statements are subjective and very much based on the countries and the context. Totally agree. That is very much the case. Please take this exercise not as something that we're, again, none of these statements I think anyone would sign up. Well, some people might, but these are meant to kind of highlight more extreme kind of positions just in order to facilitate the dialogue and also hopefully to tease out some of the nuance. Yes, so I see some comments are coming in. Elif, can we see the results of the poll? And then I'd like to hand over to two audience members to explain what they selected. Okay, that's quite interesting, actually. We have quite a range of opinions, so it's pretty spread out, with the biggest percentage going to agree equally with both statements, but actually the kind of more extreme statements also got a reasonable amount of votes. Very interesting. So in that case, I'd like to ask someone who agreed more with one of the statement on the biomass practices being unsustainable and therefore needing to focus on e-cooking. Would anyone like to explain their position? You can just raise your hand. I think that works in this setting. Any volunteers to share their opinion? don't see any volunteers so far. You can also type your
Sorry.
opinions.
Can
Oh, go
I
ahead.
come in?
Yes,
Because I'm
please,
trying to
go
look for
ahead.
the raise my hand and I can't seem to find it.
Oh,
Sorry.
apologies, actually, that might be a Teams function. I'm not sure if you can do
Yes.
that on Zoom. Great, okay,
Yeah.
go over to you, Anne. Thanks for volunteering.
Yes. Yeah, so my name is Anne Nyambane. I'm a sustainable energy specialist based in FAO Uganda, deployed by NOCAP. So for me, I chose number 3 in the middle because first of all, I think just looking at cooking as an activity, and also looking at some of the challenges that we faced when it comes to advocating or creating awareness about transitioning from the traditional type of cooking to the modern type of cooking. It's a very long process. And because cooking is a social cultural kind of activities, having a statement saying maybe it's unsustainable, so the future is electric, we cannot have like one size fit all kind of intervention, because first of all, cooking is a very cultural thing. Different foods are cooked differently, and it's really important that we acknowledge as people working actually in the clean cooking sector, is acknowledging the fact that one type of stove is not going to address all the cooking needs that households have, both in humanitarian context or even just in the normal context that is not humanitarian. So just understanding that aspect actually would play a key role in terms of our goal to actually ensure that transition happens. So, and also another thing is that looking at where we are working in, electricity is not there. So those are the kind of things that we also need to consider. And then in terms of biomass, yes, biomass is there to stay. But the thing is, we want to ensure that despite biomass being there to stay, it's not the main cooking fuel. People should actually start moving away from that, such that it's an alternative fuel, and then the clean cooking fuel actually becomes the main cooking fuel. So it's not about one type of technology or solution is better than the other. It's just that the cleaner one should be the main, and then the other ones can also be still in the mix, because the reality is that there's more fuel stacking than the energy ladder that we've been talking about over time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and I think we can all agree that was very well said. And I think, yeah, your points about there's no one size that fits all or one solution that fits all, and particularly the importance of fuel stacking is very relevant. And I see also that Mark Hankins had a comment about how the solution should also very much just depend on the availability of resources and customer preferences. 100% agreed. I see one more hand from Andama.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to thank the presenters. In the first place, I want to say that preliminary statistics indicate that 80% of the refugees and displaced people in the camps have absolutely minimal access to energy, with a high dependence on traditional biomass for cooking and no access to electricity. Therefore, biomass still remains the traditional source of energy, even in the rural areas, because the electricity that is drawn from the hydroelectric power, it is very insufficient. And also the tariffs, the costs are very high that the local communities cannot access. So the durable solution is to develop efficient energy saving stoves that can minimize the use of biomass. And that is the last point which I have selected or voted.
Thank you so much, Andama. That's a very good segue actually into the question I was going to ask our panelists. But again, to summarize the importance of looking at making biomass solutions more efficient, and also the challenges when it comes to accessing e-cooking in terms of affordability. Great points. And with that, I would like to actually ask Practical Action about their work, because you focus more on biomass solutions for now, but again, looking at how do you achieve higher efficiencies. Can you just answer and share any reflections on that, please, Chris? Hi, Krista, can you hear us?
Hello.
Krista, I don't know if you're having maybe connection issues. In that case, I might move. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, I didn't get you well. Sorry, it was, I don't know what's the issue I had, but I didn't get what you said.
No
Sorry.
problem. I just wanted to ask you if you could shed some light on Practical Action's efforts on supporting biomass-based cooking solutions and increasing their efficiency.
Okay, thank you. So for Practical Action, I mean, currently we are working with companies that supplies biomass pellets, because in the camps for electric is still an issue, because the refugee camps are not, the households in the refugee camp are not connected to the national grid. And
Hi, Krista. Can you hear us? Maybe while we wait for Krista's to get back online, can I ask Christine, maybe from SNV, because you are a cool organization of, cool example of an organization that works on both supporting the production of charcoal stoves, as well as the e-cooking electric pressure cooker pilot that you mentioned before. Oh, sorry, Krista, you're back. There we go. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, so I was saying that as Practical Action, the companies that we're working together are selling the pellets, because as I was mentioning, for the e-cooking for now is an issue, because the household in the refugee camps in Rwanda, they are not electrified, they are not connected to the national grid, and at least what they can get for now, it's an alternative of the biomass, the pellets, and what we do, we aim for higher tier stoves, and also with going from natural air draft to forced air draft, at least so that they can also have better cooking solutions, which at least can use even solar energy, because we have a company that I mentioned that has introduced forced air draft, which is using some fan, like a small fan, but which is connected to the solar panel.
Thank you so much, Krista. Moving on to Christine from SNV, we wanted to hear again about the work that you've done on both types of cooking. On the one hand, piloting electric pressure cooking, but also continuing to support, again, the production of charcoal stoves. Would you like to shed some light on this?
Yeah, in Kakuma, as I think one of us has said, we have the Kakuma refugee camp and the Kalobe integrated settlement. So in Kalobe, in terms of electricity access, quite a huge population in Kalobe are connected to the electricity. But in Kakuma, you find that most of the households are not connected to electricity. We worked with a company that is producing the improved cook stoves. And in this phase of end-of, actually, we were looking at supporting the company to be able even to produce the higher tier. That is work in progress. But we find that there is very high demand for those improved cook stoves in the refugee camp. And So I don't know, I can't say that we should leave this and go to this, but I can say maybe for the biomass, we can look at efficiency, the ones that maybe use less fuel and have less pollution on the environment. But for areas where we have electricity, we've seen also the demand for electric cooking going up. And maybe it's also good to note that the tariff that the Renewvia mini grid is giving to those ones connected to the mini grid is not as high as the tariffs for the national mini grid. And one of the partners we are working with that is promoting electric cooking in Kakuma at the moment, we are trying to look at working with the Renewvia to see if we can have a cooking tariff. There are so many in Kenya. There are so many innovations coming up in cooking. So we are also trying to look together with the technology, the partner that's promoting the technology. They're trying to look at how can we make e-cooking more affordable so that many people can take it up, given the advantages when you compare it with the biomass cookstoves. Because Kakuma refugee camp also, where it is in an ASAL area. So really, we don't have lots of forests to cut for firewood and the charcoal. So for us, we're really looking at either the electricity way or at some point we tried piloting ethanol. And then that was before COVID. When COVID came, the supply of ethanol was an issue. So the partner that was doing ethanol in Kakuma left. Currently, there are talks of doing briquettes, but now the briquettes, the issue we are looking at what will be the feedstock for the briquettes, which is now also becoming an issue. If we have to import any feedstock for the briquettes, it makes it very expensive for the residents of Kakuma to afford. So still more on biomass, but really if we have the expansion of the mini grids the way it is already projected, we look at more of having electric cooking.
Thank you so much, Christine, for those interesting reflections. We'd like to also give Purity a chance to react, but just to say in terms of time, I'm aware that we're almost up in terms of the allocated time. I just want to make sure to thank all participants who joined us today. In case you have to drop off, that is, of course, very understandable. And apologies for running over. If you have time, please do stay on. We have one more question or extreme statement to go through, and I'm sure our presenters have a lot more interesting reflections to share as well. So we would, of course, welcome that very much. But again, thank you so much to everyone who was able to join the webinar today. And please also get in touch with us if you have any questions or follow-up or any ideas about potential collaborations. We would love to hear from you. And my colleague has also just posted a link to learn more about our work. But with that, we'd like to continue with first some initial reactions from Mercy Corps' side, and then our next statement before we wrap up for today. So Purity, over to you. Just wanted to ask you, because Mercy Corps also piloted the eCoca solution of Pazito, any reactions that you would like to share from that experience?
Thank you, Megan. In regards to Mexico, we align more on statement one, but I agree with other presenters that we cannot, there's no one solution to address this issue. But then in terms of e-cooking, for us, we feel e-cooking is the future for cooking even in displacement setting, but then there are many challenges within the market for e-cooking that needs to be addressed. One being the affordability level. For example, now, yes, we are promoting solar electric cooking, but you find that very few households can be able to afford. So how can we work to reduce the cost of these technologies, but also how can we even localize the supply chain to lower the cost of these products, but also the need to do a lot of awareness creation for even the households to appreciate that in the long term, they will be able to save a lot by moving to, for example, solar electric cookers. So yeah, I agree, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to address the market for e-cooking.
Thank you so much, Purity, for that perspective. I think, yeah, that's a lot of important points that are raised that make the topic just highlight again, as I think we said at the beginning, we need all sorts of solutions very urgently when it comes to clean cooking, and therefore finding ways again to address multiple solutions and work with fuel stacking. And crucially, of course, work very closely with the community in the implementation and design of these interventions is key, as well as taking into account what is naturally available in terms of resources. Great. I would now like to move on to our next extreme statement. And if there's any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat function, and our presenters will try and get back to you when they have a moment. So the next question was around supporting local companies. So we've taken another bit of a dichotomy, and on the one hand, have one statement around, is it more important or more effective when building markets in displacement settings to work with more established companies that might already have a certain scale and experience, and to bring them into displacement settings in order to be able to really kind of reach the necessary scale more quickly? Or is it more important to work with smaller scale local companies and help them to strengthen their operations and really build very local markets that way? I will now thank you. So similarly as to before, please feel free to, if you agree very much with one of the statements, to just select that statement. If you agree slightly more with that it's better to bring in more established companies, you can choose a somewhat agree with the statement above. If you agree more with it's better to work with smaller scale local companies, you can choose the option somewhat agree with the statement below. And then, of course, again, if you are undecided or agree equally with both, there's the middle option for you. Great. And in a moment, maybe if like 10 more seconds, I'll ask my colleague Elif to share the results. And again, I can see some interesting and continued questions in the chat, so please feel free to check that out as well. And thank you to our presenters for answering. Elif, over to you. What did our audience think? Okay, interesting. This time it seems like the push is more towards working with smaller local companies. As being the key to building markets and displacement settings in general. Great, that's very interesting. And I'd love it if one of our audience members could volunteer again and share why you picked what you picked, and particularly if you agree more with supporting smaller scale local companies, as most people seem to do. Why did you pick that? You can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Any volunteers?
We have Irene raising her hand up.
Oh, great. Yes, please go ahead. Are you Irene? Can you hear us? Irene?
I think she dropped off.
Okay, maybe the connection was, if she comes back on, she can share. Anyone else want to chime in on why they selected what they selected? Don't see any more hands for now. If not, I'd like to ask our panelists. This question is to you, Purity. Could you please talk about the types of companies that you as Mercy Corps have worked with and any learnings that you'd like to share? And particularly also, how do these companies that you've worked with work with the local community?
Thank you, Megan, for this question. As Mercy Corps, we work with both international and also local companies. And our experience has been, especially working with the local, with the international companies, you find that they have variety of products, but then they are not able to penetrate the thin market, displacement settings, or other vulnerable communities. So what we do is we work with them to support them in penetrating such markets by supporting them to localize their supply chains, but also to train local technicians, local sales agents who support them then to be able to sell their product. But also you find sometimes for the international companies, especially those operating in the big cities, they don't have interest in the displacement settings because probably they don't think there's a market there. So what we do is we support in market assessment to provide them with data that proves that there's a potential market and that they can be able to invest. So in terms of local companies, I agree we need to work with local companies, and we have been doing so, especially companies that even have like they're international companies, but they have a subsidiary company registered in Uganda. You find that it's very important to work with them, one for sustainability aspect, but also to build to strengthen their supply chain. That's what we did with ECOCA, which is registered through PESITO. But then you find that one of the challenges that we have been seeing working with the small local companies is that sometimes they're not able to provide like the long pay-go models because of issues of their working capital. So you find they cannot be able to offer beyond 12 months pay-go model. So they need a shorter pay-go plan. And then when you look at the people that we target, they are more vulnerable and they might not be able to commit to pay within the 6 months if there is no subsidy. So in regards to that and what I mentioned earlier, we are working as Mercy Corps to see how we can have a specialized fund that supports the local companies to be able to access affordable working capital that they can use to finance their inventory. So in terms of these companies working with the local community, as I mentioned, we train the local we train technicians from the local community, and then we hand them over to the private companies so that now they can integrate them in their system, and this one creates jobs for the local community and also provides them, with the opportunity to also be able to scale, to share this information about the product with others. So yeah, we work together, private sector and also the community. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Purity, for sharing those reflections. I can see that Emmanuel posted a comment in the chat too about how established companies are more established, so they're better able to mobilize resources, but may not be as attractive. And I assume you mean maybe towards the customers in displacement settings who might not be as familiar with their products, whereas smaller local companies are better able to mobilize the community, I imagine, and also have lower overheads. Okay, thank you for that answer. And I also see that Irene has typed her answer here, that she supports building local companies because they have more efficient products and cheaper and build their products based on the problems they see in the community. And I think that is really key, the understanding of the needs that the communities are facing and really tailoring them to the context as much as possible and really involving, of course, the community in the development of the solution. So thank you for those reflections. I'm going to hand over to Krista now from Practical Action. And my question to you is, I know that particularly in your clean cooking interventions, you've worked with fairly new Rwandan companies. I know you've also previously worked with solar off-grid companies that are international, like Bbox. And do you have any reflections on this question that you would like to share?
Well, thank you. Okay, I will mostly support that. Yes, we need to support smaller companies, though they have, I mean, from our experience, they meet different challenges like limited capacity in terms of technical expertise and also access to finance, as the smaller companies and new companies struggle to access the capital needed for growth and expansion. But there is also opportunity to work with them as they are more flexible to adapt to changing market conditions. And they also have local knowledge, like they typically have understanding of the local context and the culture and also the customer preferences. So another thing also that I can add, working with smaller company, it's also helped in terms of sustainability, because developing local businesses also create a sustainable market ecosystem that continue to serve refugees communities even beyond the project timeline. So for Practical Action, for clean cooking, we are working with local companies only. The 3 companies that I mentioned that are currently selling in the cups are local companies. And for solar home system, we have 2 companies. One is local and another one is international. It's registered in Rwanda, but it's also based from other Africa countries. Yeah, thank you. That's what I can add.
Thank you so much, Krista. And now one last question to you, Christine, about SNV's work. I know that you've worked with local companies to develop and manufacture cook stoves. You also done a lot of work with a large international company called Renuvia for the mini grid to support them with awareness raising campaigns. And can you share your reflections on this question as well? And particularly, I'm interested in hearing, what do you think about opportunities for large international companies to also work with local refugee-led businesses? Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. I think for the cook stoves, we have a large opportunity for the local, as my other presenters and maybe the other participants in the webinar already said. Local companies, they have the advantage that they have the knowledge from the community. They can get feedback very easily and maybe adjust where necessary compared to the international. The multinational companies, in terms of decision making and the feedback channel, sometimes is very, very long, and it takes time for them to effect changes or give feedback. But now, when it comes now to the issue of resource mobilization and managing the resources and all that, now the local companies, sometimes they are not able to do that. They don't have the capacities. For the international companies, most of them, they have the capacities. And as I've indicated, quite a number that we're working with that, like one Sanking, we worked with them, I think, since we started up to now, because they were able to put up a shop or a distributor shop in Kakuma, and they have survived. Those ones that maybe came with a few stockists or project-based, you find that when the project phase ends, they also phase out. So in terms of working the multinationals, sometimes the issue of sustainability is not there. But for the local company, they will move with the economic cycle, the ups and downs, and still survive and go on. But with the bigger companies, if they have not established shop or a distributor in like the refugee, anytime we have the economic downtowns, especially like globally, and they are affected, you find that most of them, they close shop. Also, now when it comes to consumer or end user preferences, the end users, like mostly the refugee camp, they prefer commodities from the person they can relate with easily. And now here you see that the local stove production unit we have here, most consumers prefer their stoves, one, because of quality, and also two, because they know if my stove has an issue, I know where to go for it to be solved. But when they buy a stove that has been brought from Nairobi, if it has an issue, they're like, where are we going to take our complaints? They don't like the issue of making calls, because they say sometimes when you make a call, even no one receives. So now there, the local company has an upper hand. Also, as you said, for most of these multinationals, if you take the example of Renuvia, we need a lot of consumer awareness or consumer education so that they understand how to work with this, or they understand the products, and also they understand the service provider. Otherwise, it becomes difficult for the end users to take up some of these technologies, however much they might be very, very good. So we need to do a lot of consumer education or awareness for some of these technologies to be taken up, especially if they are from the international companies. Yes.
Thanks so much, Christine. Excellent reflections from all our panelists and also from our audience members. One last comment, I think, from Noel sums it up pretty well. I think he says that working with bigger companies can work well using agents because, of course, a lot of the opportunities in displacement settings might seem relatively small. And I think there's, again, sometimes just a lack of awareness also about the actual market size in displacement settings. But I think all of our panelists highlighted the ability of smaller local companies to really innovate and to learn and iterate and very much adapt to the needs and preferences of customers, which I think is a huge advantage, and a lot of opportunities to really support the building markets and strengthening local companies in displacement settings through work that way. So thank you so much to everyone. I'm aware we're very much over time, but I'm glad we were able to continue this conversation because there's just so many interesting points that have come up in our conversation. So I'll ask my colleague to move over to the next slide, please. Yeah, we can just go straight to the next slide. Just to say a few points on how to stay engaged. So first of all, again, thank you so much for joining in our webinar today. Please get in touch with us if you want to know anything else about our work. We've so far only published reports on East Africa, but very excited to announce that very soon our next report focusing on Lebanon will be published. And we are also developing another report focusing on another country in the Middle East, Jordan, as well as a report focusing on Ethiopia. And in the future, we will be doing research focusing on Nigeria, Mauritania, Bangladesh, and Mozambique as well. Next slide, please. There's many different ways to stay in touch with the GPA, so we will share the slides afterwards. So please also feel free to follow us on social media, to subscribe to our newsletter, and just check out our work generally on the GPA's website. And with that, just want to again say thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you again to our panelists for both their great support to our research and now also for sharing from their experience. And we would love to hear from you, as said, so please do feel free to reach out. And with that, again, I'd like to thank you and wish you a wonderful rest of your day.